We did it, episode 6. SMAF, we're here. I'm here with Tim. Right, guys, you're going to have to put up with all sorts of very random camera work today. As you can see, I'm here with Tim.
This is technology at its finest, called a MacBook Air 11-inch, right, Tom?
That's right, with a FaceTime HD camera.
Yep, and we can do recursive, I guess, if I show you this from a...
Let's just check to see whether it's... I'm going to hear two things at the same time. Hello, StreamingMedia West, folks. We are live from the lobby of the StreamingMedia West event, and I'm here with my erstwhile companion, Tim Siglin.
Hello.
Look, he's pointing his camera at me.
Yeah, we're doing an infinite loop, I think.
And what we're going to do is we're going to go roving this morning because everyone's so busy we couldn't tie anyone down to a specific spot, but we are going to find people.
And in fact, if you hear the chimes, what the chimes mean is it's the call for people to come into the keynote, which AWS, Amazon Web Services, is actually doing the first keynote this morning.
And we might go on into like quietly at the background for you guys so you can see what's going on out there.
And then we'll also walk you through the show floor at the exhibit hall.
You got your staff badge?
I do have my
That's
staff
what I'm gonna
badge,
get
so
in
we'll
there.
do the all access pass so that people can see what the exhibit hall will have before it opens.
Cool.
And right as we end this at 10 o'clock Pacific time, the show floor will open, and then you'll be off to do a panel.
That's right, you're off to
And I'm off to do a panel. I got to do an interview first with Keith Wims from Elemental, and then
And you guys can stay tuned to all the live action because I think there's 5 sessions a day going out on StreamingMedia.com. So I guarantee the camera work will be less shaky. So what's news then, Tim? What's been going on in your world?
Let's see. So in my world, I think one of the things that's really intriguing to me is just the whole cord cutting has seemed to accelerate. And one of the things that we we see in the States, and I don't, cord cutting is not really a concept per se for you in the UK, but for us it really is. There seems to have been a groundswell last year. There were 13 million who dropped off. In the third quarter of this year, it's been 1 million, at least based on the reports. So the questions that have come up are, will the new skinny bundles, which are about $40 a month versus $100 a month, which people are used to paying, will that really negatively impact the revenue for AT&T, Comcast, Charter, and some of these others? And I think, given the fact that Charter, Comcast are changing their names to Spectrum and Xfinity, and essentially becoming ISPs for any type of data, which they've always had. Cable modem is the third leg of the triple play. I think ultimately what we're finding here is that they really are just going full bore into being essentially tier 1 telecoms that also have video as one of their packages.
So the vibe I'm getting at the moment with all the cord cutting is there's been, I think the beginning of the year, I'm getting a lot of echo, I'm just turn my headphones off.
Okay.
But the beginning of the year, I think a lot of the cable companies were largely trying to be defensive and saying, oh no, it's not going to be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Then the data started coming in and it started kind of categorically saying this is
a thing, absolutely.
Then everyone started to try to do a bit of sizing exercise.
Right.
Yeah, the sort of defensive countermeasures teams have been sent out to go and do some early strikes with people like Cody and
Right.
So there's quite a lot of talk coming through about piracy, which seems to be driven by
Which is fascinating because we'd had piracy discussions maybe 3 years ago, and then they sort of went away, especially when in the EU there were some reports that came out that said no, piracy actually drove paid viewing of content. One of the things that I think, we talked about this briefly at dinner the other night, I think that if these ISPs, who are also video content companies, or have video content licenses like Xfinity, like Spectrum, can make it hard for you to watch content, then you'll naturally have to fall back to them. And in fact, one of the people at dinner with us said, I look for something in 3 different places. If I can't find it in 3 different legitimate places, then I'm going to have to go find it somewhere, that it's pirated, quote unquote. But
I'm sorry.
It's okay, you're going to have to be live on camera.
I don't think so. I don't.
Oh, you've got the camera.
all right, so I'm going to do it.
We are very live and on location here, so Tim is currently tuning a camera. Are you doing, Tim?
Yeah, actually tuning a camera for
Give us
white,
an ad hoc review
white
of the camera.
balance.
Is it good?
It's a Sony. It's got a nice little flip out screen. I'm pretty impressed with that.
That's awesome.
But you're gonna need to talk for just a minute, Dom.
Okay,
while
I need
I,
to talk more. So let's just carry on that theme of piracy. So what I've noticed is there is a little bit more action going on in terms of prosecutions and so on. I've just highlighted the Flipboard stories.
looks like the white balance is
showing
okay on
that
this.
there was a charge for a man who
I
was
see what
legally
you're
streaming
having
sports
problems
in the UK of 16,000. And it's quite clear that there has been more pressure to
Okay,
bring
Unimix
some
is
of these
unavailable in
these
this
piracy
shooting
groups
mode,
to bear.
so
There's
let's
another
look
story
around.
in Flipboard. I'm just trying to find it. So obviously Cody's being used. Cody is a low cost. Is Cody free?
Cody is free. Yeah, Cody's
free.
free. Plex is, has a price to it, but no,
And
Cody's
then
free.
basically people have been packaging that in various disposable setup box, Chromecast type things.
Absolutely. And the issue has not been whether the software is available. It's been that it's so easy for people to actually go out and buy a box now for about $35 that has Kodi preloaded on it. So that really becomes a big issue. And I guess what I was saying earlier on this is, if they can make it difficult or hard for you to go find it free, go find the content free, then you're going to be willing to pay the $40 or $50 a month. So I think that's where the skirmish is, as you talk about these teams that go out and attack things like Kodi. It's ultimately that the user interfaces are almost as good now on those as they would be on a paid app, or a paid service. And that had been a differentiator in the past where it looked sketchy, and so people were hesitant to use it. Now it looks just as good, or just as fine-tuned.
So what it reminds me of is Scowl.net. Do you remember Scowl in 98?
Yep.
And mymp3.com. There's just those two precursors before Napster, while the RIAA are doing little test cases to find out where they can get a foothold.
As a matter of fact, we were talking last night at dinner. Christopher Levy came around and was talking to you about Michael and mp3.com like that. Yeah, but so remind me, Scowl
was doing what we were doing with mp3u.com, which is they were just going out finding any URLs which ended with downloadable or streamable suffixes and aggregating them automatically. So it was fairly unstructured.
Right.
But they had a nice user interface, and at that time there was so little online that was true that you could literally search for a .ram file or a .m3u file.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Basically, they were aggregating into what we were only doing M3U files and so on. But basically, it became the acid test case for URL sharing as whether that was part of piracy. And obviously, they kind of failed to get a foothold with that because the implications were, hang on, anything you provide a link to could then be construed as piracy.
Right.
Which is why they turned the focus onto mymp3.com, which was a much softer target because they were giving people direct locker-based access.
Right.
If they could prove they had a CD.
And that was where CD Baby and CD Universe, people would essentially prove that they had the CD.
So Kodi, I could see Kodi going in the line of if you enter your own Sky card. The problem is that people have been making money by sharing their Sky card details as part of the commercial package, which you're not allowed to do, and that's the breach. It's not a piracy breach, it's a breach of your contract.
And there's a similar model in the States with DirecTV years ago, where people would clone their cards. And of course, they made the card cloning much harder and ultimately wiped it out altogether. But yeah, I can see
big expat market problem as well. People buy a single subscription and just share it to help.
Sure.
It's difficult to police internationally.
Well, and we've even, Claude came and spoke at one of the StreamingMedia Europe events about the fact that iPlayer isn't accessible overseas except where it is accessible overseas. And in fact, what was it, the bases in like the Falklands and other places like that, the British soldiers could watch iPlayer, but if you were an expat just sitting in San Francisco, couldn't watch it.
Yeah, so I'm going to nail all the cord cutting ones in the first let's do about no more than another 5 minutes on sort of changing market scope. But at the moment, it's definite that this year I think it's going to end quite strongly on the debate. I hope you guys can hear us on the debate about cord cutting. That's definitely ramped up over the year. I think the piracy case is coming through, but what I also detect is the discussion that this isn't lost revenue, this is moved revenue. So I've seen this stateside Comcast and so on starting to embrace the fact that their streaming subscribers pay more or less the same.
Right.
And there's an economy of scale there,
Sure.
which means that there's an efficiency.
And the fear for them is it could be a lost revenue if somebody goes to a service like Kodi, or even frankly if they go to a service like the Apple TV, with Apple's what is essentially a bundle of discounts on there.
But ultimately, do the broadband providers like Comcast care? You've still got to have a cable, whether you run IP and streaming or whether you run,
which of course, yeah, and that's so. Let me
DTT service.
DTT. Let me also bring up another interesting point. So it turns out that Verizon Wireless here in the States, in the last week, everyone who has unlimited programs, a number of which were grandfathered in for people from years past who kept their same service, suddenly had a $10 hit on their accounts this month, because if you were watching video, what Verizon Wireless was doing was throttling back the speed of the video. And if you paid this extra $10,
then you could go up to
your unlimited could still be unlimited, but you go up to a higher bit rate to see it at the resolution.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of bandwidth gains going on. There's a promotion in the UK which has just started that Sky Mobile are now offering, although they're theoretically capping the bandwidth on an account, they're allowing you to indefinitely roll and use bandwidth for up to 3 years.
Yeah, and that's something AT&T has done here in the States, and it actually works, but it only works for those people who aren't going to consume a lot of media anyway.
So here's a question for you. Look, it's a good math question for you. You and I stream a lot. We work with streaming. Maybe we have instinctively tuned our broadband accounts so that they work for our career and so on. But,
and we're always looking for Wi-Fi,
so
like here.
Always the confirmation bias and so on. But camera back on.
Okay, there you go.
But but one thing I find though, it's really weird with mirror. There we go. I'm not a good cameraman, you know that.
So we were talking about the Sky thing with the Sky.
That's right. So a bit like there's a few myths in the industry that I want to actually try out. So one of them is that everyone is suffering. Now I don't know anyone in the last 10 years. I was trying to watch a film. I was trying to watch a stream that my broadband provider is capped. And I think we're doing I think
so in the States, we had a situation last year. This was Comcast and Charter, where they essentially said we are going to cap everyone at 300 gigs. The problem was 300 gigs a month. You can run the numbers on Netflix. You can run out of that easily by say the 20th day of the month. So there's a big even price of up to 1 terabyte, but it is actually a cap. And I ran into that cap. I forget where it was. Somebody had a Comcast box, and at 300 gigs, you get a point where it says, like 270 gigs is about ready to run out of gas. Which I'd never had that kind of before. And then at 300 gigs, every time you went to a page, it would come up and it would say, you could see your bandwidth this month.
that was recent.
This was last year. It was a test, and this is sort of bad. It was a test that was good to figure out whether they could impose caps. And the cap that they tried to impose was 300. But the way they imposed it was 1 terabyte's pretty good unless you got people watching Netflix with their house and watching a lot of it.
But it's one of the myths. I'm not hearing a lot of people say that.
It is. It is. Absolutely.
And the other, and I think my grandmother says themselves about lots of people struggling through it on Wi-Fi boxes.
So let's talk a little bit about our panel. Why don't you go ahead and press it on, around yourself, and tell us about it. Go ahead and flip over to mine.
So you have control.
All right, very good.
And I'm going to try and find my panel session. So I'm doing a panel session in just a little bit over an on next generation encoding technology.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got, just get my details up. We've got so the panels called Evolution of Encoding Options.
Okay.
The sub dub, whatever you call it, there's a growing number of vendor options when it comes to encoding video, but each one's different in terms of feature sets, distribution functions, audience reach, monetization opportunities, interactivity, and many other features. And I've got James Jackson from Wowser, I've got Drew Gill from Beamer, Dan Germain from AWS Elementary, and Mahmoud Al-Dakar from High Vision.
Okay.
Dan, come talk to me. We're going to kind of work up the stack, because I always like to do that. You know, work down.
Right.
Right. Let's go across the stack in this particular case. But we're going to look at codecs, topics like latency, security, format changes, reach, different requirements in various different niche sectors and so on, special features, and then a little bit of crystal ball gazing for the Q&A at the end. So,
and that's part of the live streaming summit, right?
I think that'll also be, no, that's session C101.
Oh,
so
okay, got it. So that's in the proper. Okay, got it.
Insurance. And you're doing.
And during that same time, I'm actually on Chris Knowlton's panel that talks about first mile challenges. So we're going to look at things like bonded cellular, which I know is near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, I'll come over to that session.
And then we're going to do satellite, and we're going to talk about protocols. We're going to talk about FEC, ZXI, ARQ. I know you've got opinions on all of those things. So I'm actually pulling up the SMWest page while we're actually going along here, just to make sure that it's showing the video. Because normally you've got all this, and we've got people saying that there's a lot of background noise, and we're absolutely sorry about that. There's not much that we can do, given the fact that we're on a show floor as opposed to
look at the technology we're using, guys. Hold on, show them the microphone.
Yeah. So here's the
technology.
mic. This is the fabulous.
You know how we love you on stuff, guys. Sorry, Oliver. We'll be back to our desks next month.
Exactly.
Actually, let me just plug that for next month. We've got Matt Smith from Bright Coast.
Nice. Matt's been in the industry for a long, long time in a number of different companies. Yeah.
And actually, we've almost got over just the last 2 days here. We've almost got a queue forming of people.
Yeah, in fact, somebody stopped me at breakfast today and said, "Hey, I want to be on SMAP." So I said, we'll figure out the editorial calendar. So the other sessions that I'm in, I've got one on securing the stream, which I think is quite interesting, because as we're talking about here with the need for paywalls, if these large companies are going to continue to be able to sell bundles, there's also that question about the stream itself being secured. So I've got a panel on that, and then I've got a panel on virtual reality video. And that topic, to me, it's an intriguing topic. It's certainly a topic that we hear a lot about, but it's also a topic that we don't see a whole lot of traction on. I've actually had a number of panelists who are actually out doing shoots for VR video that weren't able to be here this week. So we've had a bit of a rejiggering in terms of the number of panelists. But I think it'll be a good panel, because we'll talk about some of the things like, is VR video starting to live up to its 3D TV, earlier sister or cousin or what have you? At the end of the day, 3D TV never really made it. Will VR video make it? And I think there are definitive uses for VR video and 360 video that make perfect sense.
Yeah. There's a dad at my kids' school who's got a nice business going around sort of stately homes and tourist locations, just doing a classic internal 360 video film.
Sure,
much higher quality than it's been for historically. But I think that niche case is always going to be a case. I'm not sure about front room.
Yeah.
I think it's a games console. I can't see it as a family entertainment device.
Right.
No more than the Wii.
Well, and if you think about the 3D TV, you had to wear glasses. Every iteration we've gone through in film and CRT and now flat panel, you have to wear some sort of glasses to augment the thing. Same is true with virtual reality. You have to wear something, or you have to have a holodeck, essentially.
We have a main sort of cortex inject system at the back of the head.
That would work.
Take off.
The Matrix. Yep, exactly.
I'm not sure. Listen, should we take a risk? Should we go and have
Yeah.
a wander? Guys, if there's
Go out on the
anything
show floor.
on the chat room, if there's anything you particularly want us to go and find out while we're wandering around for the next half an hour, let us know. But what we're going to try and do
In fact, do me a favor. Let's switch over to your camera on that one.
Looked at it, actually, so
Oh, have I? Okay, let me jump back over there then.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to put the silly hat on, which helps people find me. Do you think we'll be all right leaving our stuff here for 5 minutes, or should we
I think we'll be fine.
take it into the pool? Yeah, just keep up on that chat room. If there's anything you want us to go and investigate, what we're going to do, we're going to go and use Tim's staff pass and go and get a sneak preview of the exhibition use. So
Okay.
let's do that. Don't forget your phone.
Yep. All right, let's do it. Get my badge.
Yeah, it's very difficult with mirrored camera on this.
It is. It's sort of funny. You have to walk backwards onto the left.
I'm going to walk backwards into the
All
right.
right.
Tim's going to lead. You go and flag our way because he's got his stuff.
So let's see. We got the guys from.
Tim, if you've got the chat room open, so if
I
anyone
do.
wants to
I'm
ask
going to
us
hop back
questions,
over there to
we'll
make sure that
do
we've got that.
So who have we got here? VMix is the first slide.
That's Martin and the guys. That actually, that's a great little. VMix is a great little mixer. We got Daryl and the guys at Magewell here.
Come on, let's just go for a little tour around and see what we can
Sure.
Get the guys to wave. Wave, guys. Hey, how you doing?
Quantum, Ashon.
We've caught them all before they're ready. For
Exactly.
Us, so they're not still setting up.
Right. But this is why you get the sneak preview ahead of time. Soft iron.
Look,
Looks
harder.
interesting. Yep.
Maybe it's not hard.
It is. 32 times 4K screens. All right, we'll have to come back and take a look at that particular bit.
We're gonna, yeah, we'll probably do a few bulletins as we go.
Exactly.
Yes. Advantage, fast technology. We'll be charging this like away from people. They're waking up slowly. They're getting pumped with coffee. Oh look! I must just point out something very important.
All right.
Just in case you missed it, don't forget the book. That's really important.
And then actually, this booth here, it is right at this sort of thing. So you can see we've actually got everything set up in here for.
There's the
lovely
camera
Sheila.
again. Hi, say hi.
So this will be where I'll be for the next 2 days, almost nonstop. Besides my panels and hopefully taking a bio break occasionally to do interviews because it's part of Almost Live. And Almost Live is actually where I'll be doing interviews.
So in some ways, we're actually live. This is almost live,
Right,
and then
exactly.
afterwards you can catch up on the on-demand things on both SMAdvanced
Well,
and
and
StreamingMedia.
Almost Live is a bit of an oxymoron as well because what we're ultimately doing is a Facebook Live stream. We go out live, but raw, more like we did at StreamingMedia West. And then we'll actually cut that at the end of each interview. Those will be up for about a week until Steve comes along and re-edits and puts lower thirds on the bottom. So the reason we call it Almost Live is the finished product is Almost Live, but the actual product itself, like this, works in all.
Maybe we're going to twist Steve's arm to make our production qualities and standards a little bit higher.
Well, we definitely will ask him some questions and see if he can help us figure out whether we could do a Steadicam instead of a
This is a
MacBook Air 11.
Steadicam. What are you talking about?
I gotta say, the quality on this is actually really good.
It's not bad, is it?
No, it isn't. It isn't. So let's walk around the
Probably
little
more
more of the show
processing power
floor.
in my laptop than there is in yours. Just one more little plug for the book. Don't forget the book. You know,
Right.
buy.
And you notice it does say here, show copy, do not remove.
Yeah.
And Sheila will keep people from
And
removing.
I've said to Dan, if that copy makes it to the end of the event, then we can give that copy to Dan because I know he needs more information about CDNs.
There we go. There we go.
Now, talking about that, I think we might have just a few more sneak previews about guests. We have been twisting up a lot of arms, and in the spring, we're expecting quite a lot of people to come and do some advanced forum sessions with us. So if you want to get on, do let us know. And should we just continue?
Yeah, let's continue through.
Let's see who else we've got.
got hybrid cloud media processing. We've got.
Well, actually, that's easier. If I point the camera, if I stand behind the camera like this, then it's
There we
the
go.
right way around.
Yep.
And then I can watch it on your laptop.
Fantastic. Look at that. So we've got Lalo
and have 11 pictures. What else?
and the guys at DVO.
So DVO, look.
Yep.
More hardware. We like hardware. It's real stuff.
And I like the shirts as well. I've always been impressed with the DVO shirts. And then,
Pineapples.
you know, and the Tulips crew are right here.
Tulips guys who sponsored a lovely drink session last night, which we enjoyed, and I'm still recovering from it.
We're doing we're doing our
This is how to
Streaming
catch you
Media Advanced Forum live sneak preview of the show floor before it's open.
Good chocolate.
Oh.
Make sure you turn up for good chocolate. Good chocolate. That's what everybody needs this morning.
Exactly. Digital Watermarking Alliance.
That's new.
And that sort of goes sort of beyond the securing the stream to making sure that DRM is, rights management in general from a copyright standpoint. And I think that's important, even if you're going to allow a stream to go out non-secured, to have some way to at least watermark it in case somebody chooses to capture the stream and then put it out for others to watch.
I don't know my color contrast to do with the shirts and limelight. All this sweet limelight from the side.
Exactly. Teardeck. Yep. Lots of nice little hardware. Teardeck.
A little play with the gizmos later. Coffee bar.
That's interesting. No, don't know anything about them. Have to come back and
We'll find out.
find out. And then across from them is the social media giant, Facebook,
Never heard of them.
with Facebook Live, which of
Never
course,
heard of Facebook.
yeah, never.
Free pens.
Exactly, and stickers as well.
Expenses spare.
Very good. And it looks like tonight AWS Elemental will be hosting a networking reception.
So if you can make your way over, AWS Elemental, it's your mic on, make sure your mic's on so we're not losing too much of the sound. Not sure if you can hear us out in the chat room, but improvising on the fly. How do these teenagers do these sort of continuous in real life streams?
I don't know. I've often wondered
just
that.
all being footage like mine.
That is a very good question.
That's what we need to do. We need to contract a 7-year-old to come into our production. It's going to be much better.
No, the microphone is live because I don't have it muted. All right, very good. And we'd actually like some feedback from people out there.
I'm quite enjoying what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I keep doing quite quirky.
In
kind
fact,
of
Scott
AI-based things.
Grizzle from IBM Video Cloud will be on one of my
It's
panels.
talking,
One thing we'd like feedback from the audience is we have two microphones here, one on Dom's camera, one on mine, one on Dom's, I said camera, laptop, one on my laptop. And we'd like to know whether you get echo or whether it all seems to be in sync. Because one thing we'd want to play with is whether we could do this kind of thing down the line.
Maybe what we need is a couple of little wireless microphones. Might do the job.
In fact, let me ask people.
He's asking the chat room. Look at this. We can film him asking the chat room. If you're not joined up, do get down at SMWestForum.com. Click on the right-hand side and give us feedback about how terrible our production skills are. But keep rolling there because the archive will be very boring. It's probably quite funny watching this live, but the archive is going to be very dull. Here we go. Let's trust. So more on the DRM story, more on the security story coming up. I'm despairing. Now they've gone through some changes. The Spera's gone through some changes.
Yeah.
Their founders moved on last year.
And it's interesting that Aspera has its own booth with IBM Video Cloud having its own booth.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, that is quite interesting. So
We're waiting for feedback in the chat. Just waiting for the show to begin. Everyone's getting their foot mask, resting their feet.
speaking of hardware,
Super Micro.
Yeah.
If you've ever used a stream of most of the major CDNs,
Yep.
you've probably been coming off these boxes. They've been around for
And
a long
even
time.
if you haven't used the super micro box, you've used the super micro motherboard.
Yeah.
Because they definitely they were one of the early
We
companies
should,
in the
we should
see
see if we can guess them in at some point, actually, because they've probably got quite a history.
Yeah, they really do. Actually, I can bring in one of the guys who was an engineer there.
Okay.
It was a bunch of Princeton grads.
Yeah,
they're all based up in
Let's
that
get
area.
them
So,
on. So what have we got here? We've got
Gents at Bit Moving.
a bit moving, guys.
In fact, we had
Had a few beers with Stefan
yeah,
last
with
night.
Stefan last night. Exactly.
Definitely up and punching.
Yeah, and he was saying they're doing a lot of work in APAC now.
Yep.
Is that what he was saying? So they're really growing quite well.
Latam as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we were talking
Nice.
about the Latam market a little bit.
Nice. And then across the way here, we have a small booth from a company called AirBroad. They have what they're calling a next-gen HTML5 player, so we'll have to come back and understand what that's about. It looks like it says they have a patented non-segmented adaptive streaming, which if you remember before adaptive streaming, we had multi-bit rate streaming, which is what Microsoft had. So it'll be really interesting to see if they have a new take on it or if they're using anything that Microsoft used back in the day.
On our Flipboard, Phil, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's been a few quirky things appearing, like people reinventing multi-bit rate and adaptive.
And what I always find fascinating is when somebody says first ever, and you can go back and pull press releases from 10 years ago or 15 years ago of somebody else doing the exact same thing. Exactly. There actually was one company who sent me one.
IP, I've just reinvented IP.
One where they sent me something and said, we're the first ever. And I wrote back and said, because I had the press release.
List of the others.
And I said, so what are you doing different from this company and this company? They're like, we've never heard of those companies. And I'm like,
get your due deal done, boys. Get your due deal done.
Yeah.
Well, what have you got? Kodak look like Kodak have got better cameras than I'm using today.
Exactly. Absolutely have better cameras.
How you doing?
So.
Well, good. Looking forward to the event.
What's that?
You looking forward to the event?
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited for everything to start.
Oh, and 360 VR cameras. I'm actually doing a session tomorrow on VR video. So,
oh, cool. I'll try and stop by.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll send people to the booth so they can see what a 360 camera looks like.
Oh, yeah, definitely send Mari. We'll give a good education on it.
Good. Awesome. Thank you.
Looks like it'd be easier to carry than one of these laptops.
Yeah, it definitely would be.
So we got Theo, Claire.
Theo. Yep.
Digital element. Is that
evolution
of match
This may actually be similar to something Ben Rollins was telling me about earlier today that he's doing in the sports area where they're using sort of deep learning and analytics to bring analytics to video. And so if they're doing location for video in real time, that would actually be fairly clever. So. All right.
Cool. So okay, well, that's the show floor gone. Should we go next on the stream?
Yeah, let's definitely do that. It's a little quieter in here. We can actually sit here and you can rest your hand by putting your...
hopefully, Oliver, that sorted your background noise problem.
Let's go all the way through to... Yeah.
We have red carpet now, so oh wow, that was amazing for the video.
I'm sure it does. All right, so let's see. The other thing we could do is sneak into the keynote, and by sneak I don't mean actually sneak, but I think maybe that might not be the best idea if they're like full in the middle of it.
We'd have to be very quiet, and then you'll probably be able to hear people talking like this at the very back of the room. And somebody's standing right by the microphone asking a question. So yeah. So let's jump back onto the Flipboard for a little bit and see what's going on. So I don't know if you've noticed this, but just in trying to pull articles for the SMAF feed, let me just jump back onto we'll use your camera and my screen share. But if we jump back onto the Flipboard,
there we go.
Then I don't know if this is just a comment, but since I started trying to aggregate content for SMAF, what I've noticed is that probably 30% of any content which gets lifted by a search for streaming on almost any media is Netflix.
Ah, interesting.
It's prefaced by a discussion around Netflix. They're the mp3.com or the thing of the moment.
So you're saying it's not Netflix content, it's actually the
discussion about streaming, but with the reference point.
Kind of like 12 years ago, it was all around YouTube as the reference
Exactly.
point.
Even 5 years ago, I think it was YouTube.
That's quite interesting.
And I think that's, I've just noticed, I'm trying to sort of balance that a little bit because I just don't think we should be about just discussing things in terms of Netflix. I think there's a wider industry, but it is interesting how strong the impact of Netflix is on the sector still. And,
so let's talk about this top one you've got up here. Facebook video game live streaming is incredibly important. I think this is fascinating because if you think about just last year, Facebook Live came out.
Yeah.
And it, the idea there and sort of the way that we see streaming live streaming have worked over the years. If you remember Justin TV, that was what we called life casting.
Yeah.
Just remember, he would wear the camera, he would go around, he'd do sort
That's
of
right.
normal things. And if you think about
IRL, the new acronym, isn't it?
yeah, they're yep,
In
exactly.
real life.
In real life. So, so what we had back then was live casting, and then ultimately what he morphed into was Twitch, and it was people who were using the live casting
Process,
to stream what they were doing, which is playing video games. Then they wanted to actually get the video game itself brought over into the stream, and that created Twitch. And of course, Amazon bought Twitch. So if you think about the model that Facebook is saying now is video game live streaming is incredibly important, they're on a collision course with Twitch.
Yeah.
And it's good to see this kind of competition, but at the end of the day, if that's all Facebook Live becomes is a Twitch Lite, or maybe a Twitch Heavy as opposed to a Twitch Lite, you're sort of going to lose the benefit of the community aspect, of Facebook Live. Yeah, and but it sort of begs the question: is this sort of the way that our industry has gone a couple times, where you start as something as sort of a live webcast of yourself, as narcissistic as that is, and then you right, yeah, and then you move, and then you move into this whole model of streaming something that you're into. Now, I would dare say the number of people who are into video game live streaming, while it's a significant number in esports, is kicked up. It's not that it doesn't seem to be. To me, it seems like the reason why live game streaming works for live streaming is it's easy. You got a console, it's sitting there, it's never moving. You hook up, as you showed a couple weeks ago, you hook up a little USB capture to do your live stream, and you've got the whole thing running. But at the end of the day, that's the life of a certain group of people.
Yeah.
But what we do have to get to, and I think we're sort of proving it today, you have to get to the point where you can do live streaming of other things you do throughout the day without having to think through the process of setting it up. Because the beauty of live streaming games off consoles is once you've hooked it up one time, all you have to do
move the stuff around.
Yeah, you don't move it.
You don't see what's the little handheld ones. You don't see a lot of that.
Right, that's true.
It's Xbox. It's PlayStation. It's
PS4s. Yeah, exactly.
Stuff with an HDMI out that you can capture easily.
So I think from that standpoint, that really is one of those things that while I get what Facebook is saying about video game live streaming being incredibly important, and I'll ask when I do an interview with somebody from Facebook tomorrow as part of Almost Live, I'll ask the question on that. I think for them, that's an easy niche to go into, just like Twitch ultimately was an easy niche for Justin to go into. Because at the end of the day, you probably don't want to see your live stream camera, even 8 hours a day, let alone 24 hours a day. But what would sort of be the next thing beyond that in terms of live streaming? If we're not streaming ourselves, in terms of like the selfie model or live casting model or the IRL model, we're not live streaming video games, where do you think sort of the next natural progression would be for easy and consistent live streaming?
So I think one of the things that's changed is, as we've, in some ways the timing was good for SMAth for what we're doing with this, because part of the advantage of live casting, live streaming on these lower cost apps is the expectation of the production standard is much lower.
Yep.
So there's no way we could have 5 years ago organised to do a live stream from StreamingMedia, wandering around with camera shaking, we would have had to have a mic. We would have had to have a rig,
full production kit.
Because if you're going to do it, you're going to do it seriously, and you're going to market it.
Yep.
And actually, with the massive outflow of stuff that's now appearing, what's important is to capture the right stuff. It doesn't matter how you capture it, but it's to actually be in the moment and to be engaging and to be relevant. And I think relevance trumps everything.
And so if we think about that, and I think back to early streaming where we had cooking. I don't know if you remember, people would do like, sort of like they wanted to build cooking shows. But really, ultimately, what we could do, ease of use with this stuff now, is just if I want to have a little place to attach my iPhone aimed at my counter while I'm cooking, and if people want to, come watch that, that's great. They're probably not going to watch it live unless it becomes a thing.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things I think for live streaming gaming, that is a thing, because you're not going back and watching them on YouTube.
So I can imagine the catch up is.
Yeah.
And do you think? Okay, just a thought. Do you think that archiving in however many different transcoded formats, YouTube and Twitch archiving, do you think that they're going to maintain those archives forever? How long is the long tail on content which actually has almost nil tail value?
Well,
because I can't believe even gamers are sitting watching. Like, here's somebody who's been playing.
They do. So
10 years. I'm going to watch him playing 3 years ago.
So I've got a friend, who has 2 sons, and one of the sons is really into gaming, and he actually sits. That's what he does in his spare time. Is he'll watch people that he likes who are gamers, and he's not looking for cheat codes. He's looking for how they play, and he's looking for the commentary that they give. So, to me, I find that is sort of fascinating. But there is enough long tail content there that you can go back and watch, a couple months worth at least. Here's the funny thing I was thinking about cooking. You do the Thursday night show where you hand off from people, in the UK, you pass the baton down to somebody in the US, maybe on down into Asia Pac. What if we did cooking that, there's somebody who's cooking in Europe, in Paris, and they're cooking at 6:30 in the evening their time, which would essentially be 12:30 in the US. Well, if they cook up a really good meal and then they send out a social media alert, here's what I cooked up.
Yeah, then the next time zone round can go to the shops.
Precisely. That's what I'm thinking. Somebody on the East Coast or somebody out on the West Coast after work could go get that very stuff, and they would know my meal preparation in terms of explaining how to do these particular things is already done for me.
Yeah,
that could be a really
I can see Amazon now. They're moving into delivery of food. Going, okay, well, we need to move these real-time distribution of
exactly
this specific type of croutons, which they're cooking with in Paris this afternoon. We need to get those to the East Coast by dinner time.
and so my friend that was mentioning, she has one son who's into gaming, and this is what he does in his spare time as he watches these things. The other son's into all sorts of sports, and if you think about when you go to a
Hold
US
on, sorry, I've got to interrupt. Look who's wandering in. There's the man with the real cameras who knows how to point them. Go on.
Let's show. We have Steve with multiple cameras getting ready to set up for almost live for the interviews. So this son actually plays American football, plays basketball, plays a number of other things, and right now, what happens when you go to say a varsity game, a high school game here in the U.S., there'll be somebody who actually, there's a camera system set up at the end of the field that's recording so that the players can come back and watch the plays in between. So in American football, the offense is out for a while and the defense is out. The defense can come watch their plays while the offense is out on the next set of downs. To me, I would see sort of a natural progression of, if it's easy to do that for you to watch during the game, watch the films of the game during the game. Why not then also put that up on a website where each player would be assigned to watch those kinds of things during the weekend before the next practice on Monday. So there, in that, the camera system's there. It's already ready to do what it needs to do for the game itself. And then you're repurposing the content for further learning down the line.
So while we're still sort of talking about the Facebook side of things, I think and Twitch, I think for me the story of this month, since we last saw you guys on SMAF, the story of the month was the Twitch party. I think that brought up so many different social issues. So you followed that story, yeah? So
no, tell me about that.
So basically, there was a big. It was either a big online gaming event that Twitch massively sponsored, or it was Twitch's own annual conference, like a sort of reinvent type thing for Twitch. And they had, many thousands of people turning up for this event, and they had all sorts of periphery parties and so on.
Interesting. Okay.
Everyone there was in their sort of millennial, sort of early 20s and so on. everybody was doing IRL streaming, in real life streaming. So everyone was wandering around streaming themselves, doing stuff at all times. But when they went to some of the main sponsored parties, fights were breaking out because they weren't allowed to stream from in the parties.
Oh, wow.
At the event, which was completely about in real life streaming.
And why weren't they allowed?
There was all sorts of debate about it afterwards.
So was it copyright issues for
No,
music?
it
that
was
playing?
privacy issues. People didn't want to be streamed at parties which were hosted by people which were all about IRL streaming. There was a certain surely of everywhere. And there were people literally getting arrested, bailing other people out.
Because of the fact that they were doing private.
Hold the mic for a sec. Let me see if I can find the story.
So Dom's going to find the story here on Flipboard real quick.
Tell them about our Flipboard while we...
So if you want to follow on with us in terms of the topics that we talk about during the week, Dom does a really good job of curating out a number of top stories. Yeah, Eric, who's not with us today because he's actually got to be in the keynote, and others. In fact, those of you who are watching, if you want to actually, provide potential stories for us to talk about, that's what the Flipboard's for.
Yeah.
So let's, speaking of Flipboard, let's flip over to the Flipboard.
So this was the story that really amused me. So basically, it's TwitchCon, Long Beach.
Just up the road here from Huntington.
Yeah. So basically, big event, and everybody there is streaming live all the time. Some of them have got big audiences, some of them have got small audiences, but basically, as it says in the middle there, if you're here and you're not streaming, what the heck are you even doing?
Right.
Wait, they're obviously a couple of weeks early for the Streaming Media Conference, but
that's that's just a massive level of narcissism. If everybody's filming everybody else at the same time, then what you're looking for is the reactions of other people to being filmed by you while they're filming you. Sounds like a Mexican standoff.
Yeah. I agree. So basically what happened was people were turning up at this event, audience following, and saying, right, I'm going to a party now. One of the guys, I can't remember, the story hasn't loaded fully here, but and I'm not going to mess around right now, but feel free to check it out on the Flipboard in your own time. But basically, the guy had gone to one of these parties, and in the middle of it, somebody had said, stop streaming.
Really?
And he'd gone, no.
Right.
We're
I'm here
TwitchCon, that's what the point is.
Exactly.
And they went, no, you're at an official party, we're not letting you stream.
Wow.
And it broke out into a fight.
Okay.
And the guy was arrested. From memory, the guy was arrested for a fray or something, or whatever the charge would be over here. And then one of the other big live streaming guys bailed him out as part of his thing. So it escalated the whole thing. But it's interesting because I think that brings out, we think about the technology, but when you look at that end of it, it's like the article you wrote about suicide. There's social implications to it and stuff. And actually, there's a generation of kids who are expecting to walk around with a selfie stick on camp all the time.
And that stuff is continuing. And, I hope that the live streaming powers that be, whether it's Facebook, whether it's, others through YouTube, they got to figure out a way. And analytics would be a really good way to figure out that, okay, this looks like somebody's putting themselves in danger. But on the flip side, somebody who's going to bungee jump off the side of a bridge is also putting themselves in danger. And you would want that.
Yeah, the Red Bull, the big Red Bull skydive, he's putting himself in danger. Cut that one out. Right. Facebook's algorithms turned it off. Red Bull were pissed.
Speaking of which, I don't, and this sort of goes to that, but I don't know if you heard the story this week that Google Docs, they pushed out an update to Google Docs filter, and it started killing off a number of news organizations' Google Docs that they were working on, and it would come up and say this has been killed off because it's violated the terms of service. And it turns out that after a number of high-profile people had that happen, then, of course, it made mainstream news, and it got back to Google. Google said, yeah, we put something out that caused the filter to be a little too proactive and fixed it, or at least say that they fixed it. But at the end of the day, it really brought to bear the fact that that level of potential censorship is something that impacts the average person, as well as in the case of something like we're talking about with kids doing selfie sticks, committing suicide. our industry has to find the balance. It's not about the technology. It is about the social aspects. And I think that's important. You've got kids. I've got kids. I mean, if I think about my daughters having a friend do something like that and feeling powerless to stop them, the question is, what's the lesson to be learned? Is it to figure out how to keep it from happening so that people don't tend to try to use those services to do that? Or do we make sure that there's a way that help gets sent to them? And then if that's the case, is it something that somebody's doing it just to get help? And
and how do you deal with the false positives? And how do you do it?
Well, and I think that's where, as an industry, we've got the video part down, we've got the audio part down, the analytics, the metadata, the application of those things. I mentioned earlier as we were walking around the show floor, Ben Rollins, who used to be at AEG Digital, is now with a company that does sports analytics of basketball games. And they ring the arena with video cameras. And the video cameras, by being placed in positions that are static positions, they can then do analysis of what's going on the floor by taking the metadata and some computer vision and doing that. So that to me is the next sort of big frontier, is the applied use of metadata as part of that. And in fact, as part of
I think that's some of what IBM have been really putting a front foot forward on.
Right, and Watson, the whole deep learning and that kind of thing. And I'll talk about that some in the 20th anniversary issue that's coming out in the next couple months.
So you're going to like my buzzword bingo in there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice. Well, what's crazy was I found Larry Kless's web blog where he had a clip from me being interviewed in 2009 in San Jose at StreamingMedia West in the McHenry Convention Center. I can't watch the clip because it's a Flash player. And I can't get the Flash player to work. So I've asked Steve, who's here doing the streaming, to go through the process, because they were using an old Bright Cove player, and now they've moved to the new Bright Cove player, and they haven't transcoded that content.
So I found a hard drive with all my original Windows Media and Real Media webcasts on from 98, 99, 2000, 2001. It's really great, especially concerts and festivals I was doing at the time. And I was looking at it thinking, what am I going to do with this? Because I really don't want to keep it on a hard drive on my desk. It's eventually just going to get lost.
Sure.
And went round and round, came to the conclusion, keep a copy of the originals in Dropbox, but actually the right place to store all this stuff is to put it into YouTube. Yeah. And it's all unlisted, so they don't take it down because of privacy things. But it's there. I can go back. I can download it when I want to.
So YouTube has become your online video storage locker.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's free.
That works,
and
works until such a point when they decide that they want to charge for that, and you got to figure out who to go to next.
And that's why it almost comes back to the question I was asking about the live game streaming. How long is this long tail? How long are people willing to just keep a video that's never been watched?
And those are really long videos. They're like the length of a Bollywood movie, because if somebody's
2 hour
going to sit there and,
fortunately the originals are all 100K. 128K, sorry.
Right, sorry, I was talking about the gaming. But
the gaming,
your stuff as well. Yeah, no, I mean, and that has always been one of the problems in the industry, is we do really well with optimizing to stream short form content, and absolutely horrible for streaming long form content. So.
The conclusion I came to with YouTube is the advantage is that their front end business is where their cost is. So they're always introducing tech to transcode content as it's pulled through the system on demand. So actually what I get free, more importantly than the storage, is I get the forward transcoding into new generation technology.
And that's huge.
Whereas the Dropbox is great for the masters and the originals, but
if you want to actually watch them
in
on your
10
phone,
years time, you know, how many, like your Flash video, how often have we been caught out not because the technology's, not because the media is expired, but the medium is no longer accessible.
Right, whether it be the format or the codec or what have you.
You know, there's been a bit of a resurgence in cassette machines, because people are trying to now get their cassettes into MP3 because they've got convinced that there's a long-term value in having it digitized.
Well, and MP3 makes sense because of the fact that now that the patents are expired and it's out to open source, even if you're going to do it at double the data rate of AAC, you've got it in MP3, you've got it in MP3, and that can be converted into something else.
And MP3 will play in anything.
And
patent free, you know.
Right. All right, so we got 2 minutes left. Let's switch back to your camera real quick.
Sorry about the feedback flip there, guys.
There we go.
Now, what we're reckoning is we're going to probably need to come up with a better roving mic system. Maybe we should pick on Steve to give us some advice after the game. He's down on his knees again on the red carpet.
Show Steve getting ready to work with us.
There you go, Steve on his knees on the red carpet. See how hard this man is working for you guys.
He's working very, very hard.
And it's all on StreamingMedia.com. You to this up for the rest of the day, Steve.
So that
It's all going to be on StreamingMedia.com. StreamingMedia Facebook page. Okay, so I was pointing at the red carpet. I love the red carpet here. It's just beautiful.
So just to recap what he's saying there, the interviews that I'll be doing all day today and tomorrow will be on the Facebook page for Streaming Media, and the actual sessions that you're doing, that I'm doing, will be done on the StreamingMedia.com page, because Mobion is doing all of that production. Steve is doing this production. Eventually, these videos, once he edits them down, will then be posted sort of a couple a week up to StreamingMedia.com within the next, probably the next week or so.
I will try and tag those into the SMAF feed as they come out as well.
All right, so from a wrap-up standpoint, when's our next?
Just looking at, so 7th of December is the next show. We're going to have Matt Smith from Bright Cove, and inevitably Mark will be back online. He's busy doing real work today.
He is.
He does do it once a month, apparently.
He does.
And
Con's here at the show.
Con's here at the show as well.
Eric, of course, is at the show.
Eric's busy, although he's talked himself hoarse, I think. So yeah, it's it should be a good show next month. We should all get back together and have a bit of a decant.
And I was actually really concerned too, just as an aside. Thank you for dinner last night, by the way. I was really concerned as we were sitting around and talking, was that I started to lose my voice, and I realized I had to do this today. I had to do the panels today. I had to do the interviews today. So at some point I said to Casey, I just got to leave and go sleep, because I wanted to make sure my voice was still there.
I think you and Eric are going for the Barry White double act.
All right, and with that.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, look, guys, we'll see you next month. Apologies for any production quality issues, but I'm sure you understand. You're in the industry. It's fun.
It is.
We'll see you next month.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Cheers, guys.